Tonight we're going to continue our discussion on word problems. So our objective remains the same as last night. I can solve real-world problems involving the four operations with rational numbers. Let's take a look at tonight's first homework problem. Doug earns $10.50 per hour working at a restaurant. On Friday, he spent 1 3/4 hours cleaning, 2 1/3 hours doing paperwork, and 1 5/12 hours serving customers. What were Doug's earnings? Well, first we want to figure out the total number of hours he worked. So if we look here, we know he spent time cleaning, he spent time doing paperwork, and he spent time serving customers. So the first thing we need to do is figure out the total number of hours he worked. So we're just going to add up 1 3/4, 2 1/3, and 1 5/12. We'll need to find a common denominator. Here with the 4, the 3, and the 12, the common denominator would be a 12. So we'll multiply 4 by 3, which means we have to multiply 3 by 3. Here we'll multiply 3 by 4, which means we have to multiply 1 by 4. So let's take a look at our first mixed number. That's 1 9/12 plus 2 4/12 plus 1 5/12. I know there's several of my students who like to convert our mixed numbers into improper fractions and then go ahead and add them. And I'm okay with that. So that's a strategy I'll use because I know many of you use that strategy. So here, 12 times 1 is 12, plus 9 is 21 over 12. Plus 2 times 12 is 24, and 4 is 28 over 12. Plus 12 times 1 is 12, and 5 is 17 over 12. So when we add those all up, our common denominator is still 12, and I need to do 21, 28, and 17, and just go ahead and add all those up. 8 and 1 is 9, and 7 is 16. 2 and 1 is 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 66. So that's 66 over 12, and then we can always convert that back to a mixed number. 12 goes into 66 5 times with 6 left over, so that's 5 6/12. 5 6/12, if I divide numerator and denominator by 6, is the same as 5 1/2. So all that we were figuring out there was how many hours he worked. So he worked 5 1/2 hours. Now we're not done with the problem. We have to figure out how much money he made. The question asked, what were his earnings? Well, now we know he worked 5 1/2 hours. He makes $10.50 per hour, and he worked 5 1/2 hours, so we would take the amount he makes per hour and multiply it by the number of hours he works. Since the 10.50, the 1050 is in decimal form, let's go ahead and rewrite our 5 1/2 hours in decimal form. That's 5.5 hours. Then we'll just multiply our 1050 by our 5.5. Keep in mind when we're multiplying decimals, no need to line up the decimal points. 5 times 0 is 0. 5 times 5 is 25. Put down a 5, carry a 2. 5 times 0 is 0 plus 2 is 2. 5 times 1 is 5. Put down a 0 as a placeholder. 5 times 0 is 0. 5 times 5 is 25. Put down a 5, carry a 2. 5 times 0 is 0 plus 2 is 2. 5 times 1 is 5. Just go ahead and add those together. 0, 5, 2 and 5 is 7, 5 and 2 is 7, so 57, 750. And then we want to see how many decimal places to move over. This is 2 places, 1 more place, which means we need to move over 3 places. So our final answer is he makes $57.75 for working those 5 1/2 hours. So that's our final answer. Hopefully that helped you think through that problem, or if you're someone who was just double checking, hopefully you fast forward it and you also got $57.75. Let's try the next problem. A pine tree measured 40 1/2 feet tall. Over the next 7 1/2 years, it grew to a height of 57 feet. During the 7 1/2 years, what was the average yearly growth rate for the height of the tree? So we know it started at 40 1/2 feet. it grew, and at the end, it was 57 feet. And the amount of time it grew was for 7.5 years. I want to know the average yearly growth rate. That means how much it grew per year. Well, the first thing I want to see is how much did it grow over those 7.5 years? I know it grew from 40.5 up to 57. How much did it grow over that 7.5 years? Oh, I could just take my final answer, 57, and subtract off my 40.5. Now, if you want to subtract 40.5 from 57, I'm going to rewrite the 57 as 56.2 minus our 40.5. The reason I did that is because when I want to subtract, I need it to have a common denominator of 2. So 57, if I borrow 1 from the 57, that becomes a 56. Borrowing 1 whole is the same as borrowing 1 2/2. That's why I made my 57 the same as 56.2. So now I just go ahead and subtract. Some of you are more comfortable writing it vertically, so I'll go ahead and do that. So 2 minus 1 is 1/2. 6 minus 0 is 6. 5 minus 4 is 16.5. That says it grew 16.5 feet over those 7.5 years. So the tree grew 16.5 feet over 7.5 years. And I want to know how much on average it grew per year. So if I know the total it grew was 16.5 over the 7.5 years, how much per year? Well, I could set up my ratio. The amount it grew, 6.5, over the number of years. So this would be growth over years. It grew 6.5 feet over 7.5 years. And I say to myself, okay, I want to know the average yearly growth rate. I want to know how much it grew in 1 year. So what would I do in the numerator and denominator to simplify this? Oh, 7.5 divided by 7.5 is 1, so I do 16.5 divided by 7.5. So that's actually what we're going to need to work out, 16.5 divided by 7.5. Well, let's just rewrite each of these as impropers to start. So 2 times 16 is 32, and 1 is 33 halves divided by 2 times 7 is 14, and 1 is 15 halves. Then you can do your skip, flip, multiply. That's 33 halves. Keep that the same. Change your division to multiplication, and then you take the reciprocal of that second. You flip that second one over, that second fraction. Then I'm going to choose to simplify. 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 2 once, straight across the top, straight across the bottom is 33 over 15. 15 goes into 33 twice with 3 left over, so that's 2 and 3/15. Dividing numerator and denominator by 3, I get 2 and 1/5. That means it grew 2 and 1/5 feet per year. And if over 7 years it's got to get up to 16 feet, it makes sense. 2 times 7 is 14 plus this extra. So over 7.5 years, growing 16.5 feet makes sense. That means it's going to be 2.5 feet per year. So that's your final answer. I know I have a lot of work all over the place. Let's take a look at the last one. Izzy buys a car that costs $12,764. She must pay $2,000 the day she buys the car and then $299 every month until the car is paid off. This is what happens when you buy a car. You put a certain amount of money down, for instance, $2,000, and then every single month you have to pay until the car is paid off. How many months will it take Izzy to pay for the car? Well, first of all, the car originally cost $12,764. That first day she's going to pay $2,000, so we take that right off the top, and that means she's financing $10,764. That's the amount she's going to be paying back. And each month she's going to pay $299 every month. How long will it take? Well, I'm just going to take this split it up into payments of $299, break it up into payments of $299, and how long will that take? Well, if I'm breaking it up into payments of $299, that means I'm dividing. I'm dividing $299 into 10,764. I'll just put my decimal point way at the end. So now I say $299 goes into 1,076, probably about 3 times. 299 times 3. 3 times 9 is 27. 9 times 3 is 27, 28, 29. 3 times 2 is 6, and 2 is 8. 897, that looks like. So I need to go ahead and subtract that off. Borrow from the 7, make the 7 a 6. 16 minus 7 is 9. I can't take 9 from 6. I'll borrow from the 10, make the 10 a 9. That becomes a 16. 16 minus 9 is 7. 9 minus 8 is 1. And then I just have to bring down the 4. How many times does 299 go into 1,794? You might have to do guesstimates, but I'm going to try a 6. So 299 times 6. And the way I guessed the 6 was I had said to myself, that's about 300. 300 times 6. 3 times 6 is 18. So 300 times 6 would be 1,800. And this is 299. That's a little less than 1,800. That's just how I guesstimated the 6. And now I'm going to check that it works. 9 times 6 is 54. 6 times 9 is 54, and 5 is 59. 6 times 2 is 12, and 5 is 17. So it did work. So 1794, subtract off. What that tells me is it will take 36 months for her to pay off the car. She must have taken it out for a 3-year loan. Hopefully talking you through those problems helped a little bit tonight. I know word problems can be tough for some kids. Try to have a good night. Take care.